Hey, what's up? And welcome back to another episode of the Straight Shooter Recruiter, or welcome back to my YouTube channel based on where you're watching or listening, what have you. But I am super excited to be hanging out with you today. I'm going to be doing a bit of a short and sweet video / episode on a question that I get pretty darn often. I have to first acknowledge it's my birthday. Woo, woo, woo. And I honestly am just feeling unbelievably grateful for this community, both on Instagram, on TikTok, the podcast, YouTube. I am so unbelievably grateful. I remember literally a year ago today, so October 26th, my dog is attacking my blanket. Sir, you better not. Anyways, I remember literally a year ago exactly today, I made an Instagram story talking about how crazy it was that I had 10,000 Instagram followers and that was absolutely mind-blowing. And that still is, let alone now, it's over 200K, which what? It is absolutely bananas. I cannot thank you enough. So today's question is one that I often get asked about all the time, and it's actually an interview question I don't like to ask, and it's the reason I genuinely don't think I've ever asked this. The question is, why did you leave your last job? Man, this is such a loaded question. Sometimes it's as simple as you weren't happy with the work you were doing. You were being underpaid. Other times it's much more complex and emotional and has so many different layers to it, which is why I think this sometimes can be a bit of an inappropriate question. Don't get me wrong. I understand why employers might have to ask this to understand why you left so soon or why you left after getting a promotion, just to better understand your career trajectory and your decisions. But I also sometimes think asking questions like this can introduce bias that doesn't really have to be there in the interview process. But if you are in the position in an interview, whether it's a first round or a final round, when you're asked, hey, why did you leave your last employer? This is how I would recommend tackling the conversation. Tip number one, avoid being overly negative. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to lie and say that it was the best experience of your entire life, but you don't want to walk into the interview and say, they paid me like crap, my boss is crazy, it was the worst experience of my life. Reason for that is because studies show that when we speak positively and we come across as a positive or optimistic person, we're more likable. And if you've listened or watched my content before, you know that studies also show the number one kind of skill outside of the talent or the experience that you bring to the job that's going to help you get an offer is likability. It's the how much do I want to work with you factor. And being a negative Nancy, sitting there talking crap about your previous employer, not always a good look, even if your employer kind of deserves it. I just had to go on a wild goose chase with my dog, but I'm back. My second tip is make sure that you're transparent about your reasoning why. For example, if you left the job because you didn't see opportunities for growth, if you weren't being paid adequately, or if you just felt like you weren't supported by your boss, there's nothing wrong with you saying that. Same goes for if you were terminated or a part of a restructure. I actually advocate for being as transparent as possible. Number one, because recruiters can often sniff out when you're not giving the most honest answer. And number two, if you have a company that's not going to be empathetic towards your situation, is that really a company that you're actually going to want to work for? So I kind of think about it like that. But it's all about the way you word things. You want to be really tactful, almost diplomatic in the way that you're saying something. So for example, instead of you saying, my boss was a total jerk, you might say something like, I'm looking for a company where I'm going to be supported in my growth, and I have leaders that are going to be equipped to help me get there. If the pay was really bad, you might not want to say, I basically wasn't able to buy anything other than groceries because that's how little they paid me. You might want to say, I'm looking for more opportunities to have an expanded mandate, be able to impact more work, and be compensated as such. There's nothing wrong with you being transparent and honest and authentic. You just want to make sure you're communicating it in a way that still has a positive flair or a positive tone and is also diplomatic and not overly harsh. Now, there's been a lot of cases where someone has been impacted by restructuring or terminations, or it just didn't work out on the employer's end. That's normal. So many people in their life have been fired from jobs. Some of the most successful people in the world have been terminated for one reason or another and landed on amazing opportunities they never expected. There's nothing wrong or embarrassing or shameful about being redirected. Remember that quote that I always talk about? It's not rejection, it's just redirection. There's nothing wrong with that. So after you've taken some time to grieve and process what's going on, because even though hearing these quotes is helpful, it doesn't change the fact that getting terminated can be a really emotional process, and it can be something you need to give yourself some space to heal on. If you're in an interview and they ask why you're no longer working with that company, and the honest answer is that you were terminated, it's okay to share that. It's okay to share what your experience was like. You might want to keep it high level and say something to the effect of, I was a part of a restructuring and my job was unfortunately impacted. You might say, I accepted the role expecting to be doing X, Y, and Z, and when I came in, that wasn't the expectation, and it just didn't work out on either party's end. There's nothing wrong with being transparent, but again, it all comes back to being positive with how you communicate it and diplomatic so that you're not coming across as overly harsh. This was a super short and hopefully sweet little episode or soundbite or video, whatever on earth you're listening to this on. I really, really hope that it helped. I know it's a stressful question to be asked and is also typically one that I don't like to ask, but in the off chance someone is asking you why you left your previous employer, I hope these tips really help you out. I appreciate you so much. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will talk to you next week.